everybody. It's Gene Marks, and I am back with you again for the Hartford Small Biz Ahead Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to talk about AI. We're going to be talking about prompts and generative AI and getting the most from your AI database, whether it's ChatGPT or something else. Our guest today is Anna Bernstein. Anna is a staff prompt engineer at Copy.ai, and I know you've got lots of questions about all of that, because we're going to get into all of that. But Anna, first of all, thank you so much for joining. I have a lot of questions for you, and I'm glad you took the time.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So first of all, before we go any further, because I told you before we started recording, I flash your face and your famous video up in a slide to groups that I talk to. What is the name of your video again that's garnered so many views? It's like 6 tips for writing great prompts, something like that, right?
9, we can look it up. I created the video and recorded it. The marketing team was more responsible for the copy around it. So.
It's fine. What I will tell you guys, if you're watching or listening to this, because this is going on YouTube as well, is that when you guys are finished watching this video, just search for Anna's name, Anna Bernstein at Copy.ai, writing prompts. You'll find the video. And it's great. It's like 15 minutes long, and it tells you a lot about writing prompts, which we're going to talk all about prompts. But first of all, let's talk about you, Anna. You work at Copy.ai. You're a staff prompt engineer. So first of all, tell me, what is a staff prompt engineer? What is Copy.ai? How did you arrive here at this position?
So Copy.ai is a generative text-to-text AI company, but also a workflow automation platform. Our main product is called Workflows, and how it works is that you can type in a natural language query that just to put it simply, you can type in plain English the type of workflow you want, and it will just generate that workflow with all the steps, and you can then scale that workflow sort of like an Excel spreadsheet. You can just like put it in as many inputs as you want and run it, and kind of scale the generative AI processes that work for you. And in order to kind of lead into what my job is as the staff prompt engineer at Copy.ai, also sort of like head of prompt engineering, whatever, it's the actual process of taking that natural language and on the back end generating a pre-built workflow from it with pre-built sort of interstitial prompts that help you generate copy along the way. Requires a lot of back-end prompt engineering. So the vast majority of my job is actually working on building, designing back-end prompts, these sort of big, complicated, unseen prompts that the user can kind of slot their language into. They don't have to see those prompts ever. They're kind of like under the hood. And which usually chain together with multiple other big backend prompts make the AI capable of things that it otherwise usually isn't, like in the case of our products, building these workflows. And so another big part of my job is not just building these tools, but even and the infrastructure behind them, but like even figuring out how to do that from a prompt side. So I spend a lot of time with the models developing new techniques and strategies for getting them to do what I want. The majority of those aren't relevant to front-end users. They're a bit, they get a bit complex and aren't super necessary for the average user. And frankly, some of them are proprietary information. But the main thing is that I've spent a lot of time, like, I don't want to know how many hours at this point, figuring out how to communicate with these models. And a lot of that research is also relevant to front-end users and that type of prompting.
So you're doing this so that the front-end users don't have to, right? And I think that, and also just to take a step back, and not to insult the intelligence of our audience in any way, but what is a prompt? Explain to us what a prompt is.
Yeah, so a prompt is any piece of information you're feeding to the AI to get something back from it. In the case of text-to-text models, large language models, you're it's just like what you say in the conversation,
right?
And then that causes the AI to say something back.
Right. And I guess that's just when we talk about AI, there's a lot of different large language models out there. The most popular that we all know, of course, is ChatGPT, and OpenAI. So obviously when you log into ChatGPT, and guys, if you're watching this or listening to this and you haven't played with ChatGPT, I strongly recommend that you do because there's a lot of business uses for it. Another topic for another day. But the first thing it's asking for is a prompt. It's a question, what's a good recipe for turkey meatballs, or give me an itinerary. And I think what I'm getting from what you're saying, Anna, is that when I ask a generative AI large language model, ChatGPT, a question, there are a bunch of other prompts going on based on my prompt that are like behind the scenes that's trying to dig out the response for me. And it seems like that's kind of the job that you do at Copy.ai. Am I correct in saying that?
I can't speak for
You
OpenAI's
can't
model,
speak for ChatGPT, yeah.
but yes, for a product like ours that's built on top of model providers like OpenAI,
Yes.
The value we're giving is that we have these very, very complicated like backend prompt structures that can like take your prompt and through a series of other prompts, like really transform it into something useful for you.
Got it. All right, that makes sense. Anna, tell me, when you were a little girl, did you look up at your parents and say, Mommy and Daddy, one day I want to be a prompt engineer at Copy.ai?
That's exactly what I said. And they said, what
It's
no,
always
I
the aspiration. Well, that gets me to my next question. Yeah. So, I mean, no one, first of all, people in 2023 don't know what a prompt engineer is, although now it's becoming a lot more, I'm sure you have to explain to many of your friends what you do and what your title means, but it makes sense. And it's a perfect example of a job, one of many that AI is creating. You hear in the news all the time of AI getting rid of jobs, and it will get rid of jobs, but it will create, many jobs as well, like yours. So what's the training? Like you're not, my son is a mechanical engineer. Okay. You're not an engineer, I guess, like a mechanical or a software engineer. What is your background or what is your training?
Yeah, when I,
Where'd you go to college?
Sorry?
Where'd you go to college?
I went to McAllister College in Minnesota. I studied English.
Yes.
I also studied Fusha, Arabic language translation. Please don't ask me to speak in Arabic. My Arabic is a mix of like toddler Arabic and like medieval poetry Arabic. But I've always been fascinated with language, with the analytical side of language. I think, writing poetry, you are creating these it's a little bit like you're creating these bizarre but very, very, very precise speech acts sort of that are meant to elicit a response, in that case from a reader. But when I'm writing prompts, I often employ the same part of my brain at least, where I'm trying to elicit a specific response from the AI through, in some cases, kind of convoluted things. But yeah, my background was in historical and sometimes biographical research, and sort of on the literary side, working on literary journals and that type of thing. And then from Copy.ai's side, I think it's useful to say where they were coming from. Our product used to look really different back in 2021. And there were these prompts for each tool, and they were written by one of our co-founders, Chris Liu, who's great. And he is a very like forward-thinking person, and he had this idea of like, our product can be better. And I think what's going on is the prompts. I think it's actually the prompts that aren't good enough. And this was actually kind of like it was a really forward-thinking thing at the time.
Very, very innovative thing to think about, right?
Yeah. And he was like, what if they're like, everyone, had just started, the term prompt engineering had just kind of started being used. And he was like, what if there was a role of prompt engineer? And they tried a lot of different people in that role from different backgrounds. None of them quite worked out. And then I met one of the other employees there, Wenyu, and he was like, you're smart, you're a language person, your brain works in a weird way that might be useful for this. Like, do you want to give this a shot? So I was started on contract with them. They were like, "Can you fix tone?" And I was like, "I can try."
I get asked that question all the time. Can you fix tone? I wouldn't even know what to do if someone asked me that question. But here you are saying, I can try, right?
Yeah. So it was a lot of trial and error. And then I did that and was hired full time. And it was this. Now there's a lot of like voices about how to do prompt engineering well, and there are more and more papers about advances in prompt engineering, which I certainly keep up with. At the time that I was starting, so much of my job was like giving us an edge through coming up with new prompting strategies.
Well,
And actually, that's still a big part of my job. But there was no rule book. People are like, "How did you learn this?" And I'm like, "I taught myself." There was nothing to learn, but there weren't a lot. There were certainly no formal resources on it that
sure, sure. Yeah, you're
no,
on the bleeding edge of this stuff.
yeah, yeah. So a lot of it was just time, sort of monk-like, spent with these models.
And I imagine your background though is one that particularly getting back to when you were writing poetry and and crafting a small piece of narrative. You're spending so much time on each word, and trying to draw out the meaning or better context for each single word that you're working with, which is exactly, I guess, what you need to do when you write a good prompt. Is you have to give a great amount of thought to the words that you're using, right?
To the words, to the structure, to the like landscape you're setting up with it. Yeah, yeah.
It's
There's a lot.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So let's talk about writing prompts as it is. Now, you work for Copy.ai, and each company is different. Each large language model is different. I get that. But I guess I'm asking more in as general as you can be, okay, as far as advice that you give. I do have a lot of clients, and I do have a lot of people that I'm speaking to now at industry association, business owners, and they're starting to play around a little bit with Chat GPT is the big that's their first stuff, and obviously we've got coming down very shortly. We'll be having Google Duet for Workplace and Microsoft Copilot, and and so there's going to be a lot of and even in Microsoft Copilot, which is being introduced in phases, but the way it's working with Excel, is one that you have giant spreadsheets that you can ask questions of it to give you back, what product lines are showing the best profit margins, that kind of thing based on that data. And I think as these, as their capabilities expand, and then as the language models that they can reach into, like accounting systems and, those kinds of things, you're going to have a lot more businesses really not only relying on this generative AI products, but more importantly, they're going to need help extracting data from that and asking questions. Okay. So what advice would you give to a Luddite who is starting out with Chat GPT, and they're asking it a question, and they're not getting the answers that they need? What have you learned about writing a good prompt?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are, certain tasks that are more like information finding, like, asking a question. And then there are tasks that are more like generative, like, write me XYZ thing. The general advice, the most important advice I can give for like front-end prompt engineering is like, to be rich and precise. I think a lot of people approach it like they're interacting with Google, where they're kind of just shouting keywords at it.
Right.
And I want you to think about that as if you were talking to a human being and you were doing that and they were like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
And that's not going to give you the best result. You want to be a little more human with it. At the same time, you want to be extremely precise. It's not quite like interacting, obviously, with a human being in that, one of my favorite comparisons is Amelia Bedelia. Like, it is so hyper literal. It's human-ish, but it's very, very, very literal. And so you really have to be careful about exactly what you're saying. And then in terms of like the richness of it, the sort of human side of it, one of the wonderful things about these tools is that they do have some amount of like, they have a huge amount of like subjective understanding of human concept. So it's like a robot, but it's like a robot that knows what the word effusive means. And you can go ahead and like pile on adjectives and whatever to give it this better rounded understanding of what you're doing. And I actually like to think of this sort of richness as another type of precision in a way. Like you're hitting the nail on the head, both in terms of the literal logistical instructions you're giving it, and you're hitting the nail on the head conceptually at the same time as well. And if you can really, really accurately describe what you're doing on a subjective level or an artistic or creative level, often the result you'll get back is a million times better than if you sort of threw general words at it and wanted it to use its inference to do the thing that you have in your head.
Great advice. Let's take a few like actual examples so people can walk away with thinking about this. Say I wanted to use, again, I got to use ChatGPT, but say I said I'd like hello ChatGPT, I'd like to can you write a blog post for me on making spaghetti and meatballs? Okay. How would you approach that? Like what would be your prompts to that? Would you start out just generally like, hi, please write a blog post on making, on how to make spaghetti and meatballs?
I mean, it's not the worst prompt in the world. I've seen worse. But I generally tell people if they're, really working on this prompt to sort of use this tent-like structure where, for every human interaction, we have a huge amount of context, whether that's, even if it's someone coming up to you on the street, that's context in and of itself. What are they wearing? Even getting a random email, you're opening an email and that's context. The subject line is in all caps. That's context, so we want to give the AI the same, tools of context to work with. So you want to start with like, I'm trying to write a blog, or one approach that I would work is like, I'm trying to write a blog about blah, blah, blah. There's also the tried and true method of, an oldie but a goodie at this point. I mean, oldie, it's like a year old, but
I know nothing's really that old right now.
But of telling the AI who it is, giving it a role to play. You are a well-known blog writer, food writer, who loves Italian food.
Right.
And you can put that either in the like message space, or you can put that for ChatGPT in particular in the custom instructions, which we also call the system prompt. And so you start with that, but you give it that context. You don't start in media res, which is what I see a lot of people do. And then I like to move on to the what I call the resources section, this is where I see a lot of people start. So that's like, the information you have about the blog, the brief, maybe the outline for it, the audience, like whatever.
Right.
It's useful to give audience. It's useful to say like, this is who I am, this is who you are, this is who we're speaking to. And so you go through those, you kind of give that library of resources, whatever it is, very well labeled. You choose a label for each one, like blog brief, blog outline, you label it. And then
I gotta stop you. I'm sorry to interrupt you because I know you're on a roll here, but when you're talking about giving the brief, when you're talking about labeling it, when you talk about giving it a voice, whatever. So this, I just asked a simple question, write a blog about making spaghetti and meatballs. But what I'm getting back from you is that no, your prompt is going to be much more involved than that. Like this language model needs more information from you. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean I think most people, for the result they're looking for, this is a better approach. If you truly want just a generic blog about spaghetti and meatballs and have no other ideas than that, then please write me, maybe throw in some good, like, please write me a compelling blog about spaghetti and meatballs.
Right.
Not the worst prompt in the world. But, saying, please, and then there's like the next step, which is like, please write me a compelling blog about spaghetti and meatballs, for people who aren't super used to cooking, or maybe people who love Italian food, or whatever it is. And then you can add
garlic lover,
blah tone. Yeah. But sort of to finish out the structure I was talking about, like that
Yeah.
would actually be the next part of the structure, is that sort of you can take that command you started with and actually like put it at the end of that prompt. You want to sort of end with this final command or even reiteration of what the actual task is. So it doesn't have to go hunting back through the prompt, like in terms of its attention patterns, whatever. It can just like find the task at the end, know what the task is really well. And you also, in that sort of final command line, I talked about labeling the resources really well. If you have resources, if you don't, that's fine. But if you have included those, you want to use those same labels in the final command. So you'd say like, use the blog brief to write a blog about spaghetti and meatballs that follows the outline I gave you. And you would label those like blog brief and outline. So it basically, the underlying principle to a lot of this advice is that it has limited brain power per generation. And for us, we actually conserve brain power sometimes by consolidating what we're saying in terms of like, write the blog about it. And we already know what it is. And that doesn't take up more brain power for us. It just makes the sentence short. But for the AI, that's just like that tiny extra little bit of brain power where it's like, I have to figure out what it is first before I do this task. So you just want to take everything that you possibly can off its plate before, like, so that it can focus on the central task that you're giving it. So more is not always better. It's like specific more.
What you remind me of is like, it's like you're talking to an assistant. I mean, if I was working with somebody and I said to them, I need you to write me a blog on spaghetti and meatballs, that assistant would say to me, okay, well, I don't know, like what tone should I use? How long should it be?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Who's the audience? So
why are we doing this?
Why are we doing this? These are all, how much is this for like a large group, or is this for just one person who would be of interest in this? Is the person reading this from Italy, or from somewhere else? I mean, all these different things and I guess what you're saying is you want to try and give as much context as possible to the GenAI platform, to help it, like you would be giving an assistant to do. Is that,
you want to
saying
give
that correctly?
As much relevant context as possible, but you really want to give that context in a coherent way where it's really legible to the AI. Because there's such a thing as too much context, and there's such a thing as giving even relevant context in a really confusing way that's just going to put more on its plate as it tries to figure out how to use it.
Okay, let's take another example. Say a job description. Say I'm looking to hire a prompt engineer for my company, and I'm going to put a job posting on LinkedIn for this, and I need help writing out this job description. Okay, say I went to ChatGPT. Say I asked you. You're the prompt engineer, so you're gonna ask ChatGPT. What prompt would you give to a ChatGPT to help write a job description? What more information am I not including right now in this just general request?
Well, I would, probably start with giving it, again, just that trick of a bit of a role. Like, you are a recruiter who's an expert at writing job descriptions, and you're an expert in this field, maybe.
Okay.
Then I would say, I kind of what you said, like, I am writing this job description to do this, to put it on LinkedIn. And I would maybe even add a little bit more like of a motivator there, even a bit of emotional weight, like, because it's important that we find a high quality candidate for this job.
Wow. Okay.
Or that's what we're trying to do with this. And that can be helpful. And then I would say job details. I would not say job description, because that kind of repetition, because it's like I'm writing a job description, but the job description's already here. So I'd say job details, and then I would put the details of the job, and then I would say, use the job details to write a accurate and compelling job description that would appeal to high quality candidates for a role. I'd be a little more specific than that, but yeah.
That's great. I know we only have a few more minutes left, and this advice is super helpful. I mean, is this the kind of stuff that, a typical business owner should know? I mean, your job is very specific, in writing prompts for Copy AI and for your large language model. And like you said at the very beginning, you'll have a customer, they're going to put in their general, their starting prompt, but it's your prompts behind the scenes that are taking what they were asking for and trying to ask it better, of the database. Do you think that AI will ever evolve to the point where you're out of a job, where, AI will be writing its own prompts, so it'll get smart enough to do what you're doing? Is this like a limited career?
You know, if it's ever smart enough to write the kind of prompts I have to write for it, I would love to be involved in making it that smart. But it's I don't think so, only because the type of prompting I have to put together is, again, this mix of like human, it's this human precision that there's sort of a push and pull with these models. On the one hand, they need to be very, very precise. Like, it's good that they're hyper literal for my work, because I need them to do these really strange tasks. I essentially need them to generate bizarro code.
Right.
And I'm walking them through like reasoning for that, and then like generating code and like all these things through these examples. I'm getting like it. So that precision is very valuable, but they also have to understand things like human motivation and reasoning, because that's part of like why they're generating code, like or that type of code. And so there's a push and pull where human communication is like relies really strongly on inference. It relies really strongly on well-intentioned and useful willful misinterpretation, because none of us are very precise when we're speaking or even writing. So these models are human but require precision at the same time, in a way that I think there's so much value there to knowing how to do that. At the same time, like, I used to kind of go back to your question more specifically, I used to be worried that my job was going to be temporary. Like, for the first year of it, new models would come out and I'd be like, everyone would be like, this is it. It's the end of prompt engineering. And I'd be like, oh no. And then I would have like so much more work because there was a new model, and not only would it function differently, but it would be capable of a lot more through prompt engineering. And I think I used to, and I think a lot of people still think of it this way, that like, if this is, the slope of what the models are capable of, and this is like what we expect them to do, that prompt engineering like lives in the triangle in between, and it's just going to get smaller and smaller. I also used to believe it was that way, but nowadays I think it's more like this, where the more powerful the model is, the more work I have, because the more it's capable of with really high quality prompt engineering. So
it's a great answer. And I just, to leave this out, like, I think most business owners themselves, I mean, the advice that I've been, trying to give, I think is important. I think that, first of all, for prompts to work well, the databases have to be good. And most of my clients' databases are not very good. I bet you Copy AI's databases are a lot better and getting better. So cleaning up your data is is definitely a big thing. And I don't know if the typical small business owner would hire a prompt engineer per se for their business, but I think it's a safe assumption, Anna, that engineers like yourself are being employed by software companies all over the world, so that when we're making requests of their databases or their generative AI large language models, there's been work done by you to make sure that my prompt is getting utilized in the right way to bring me back the information I want. Is that a safe assumption to make?
Yeah, I think so. I think right now the role is often conflated or combined with a machine learning role. I mean, it is a machine learning role, but I see people get in touch with me trying to hire for like a prompt engineer, but they also want someone who is coming from machine learning. And I think there are many good prompt engineers out there who are coming from a machine learning background, but I also think you will get a lot of maybe machine learning experts who don't quite realize like how complicated it can get with the prompting. So I see those two roles like dividing more in the future, working closely together, but more dedicated prompt engineering roles. As for like,
Fascinating.
it's a small business hiring a prompt engineer, I kind of agree. But it's almost like part of what, not to plug my own product to business again, but it's part of what we're doing at Copy.ai, where they shouldn't have to. There are tools out there like that help to generate, these repeatable AI-based, GenAI utilizing workflows for whatever they need, without them having to like laboriously build it themselves and figure out the prompts themselves.
Right. It almost seems like you're sort of a middleware, I mean, you've got the user interface, you've got the back end, and then you've got your role to facilitate, that communication between the two, to make sure the results that come out are useful. And that's how I look at it.
I think that was more true for earlier in our product. I would say nowadays my work is surprisingly enmeshed in the back end.
Good.
Like
Good.
There's parts of it that need to be generated that are in natural language, and then there's parts that need to be generated that are code, and there's every intersection between the two, and our system, moves in and out of AI generative steps that I'm in charge of into programmatic steps that are interstitial, and then back into those generative AI steps, and it kind of has all become almost like one thing.
Right.
Strange new world.
Anna Bernstein is a staffed prompt engineer at Copy.ai, giving us, lots of great information and background about what prompt engineering is all about, how it will impact our business, and even a few great pieces of advice on writing good prompts. Anna, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. This has been great.
It has been fun. Everybody, you have been watching and listening to the Hartford Small Biz Ahead podcast. My name is Gene Marks. If you need any tips or advice or help in running your business, please visit us at smallbizahead.com or sba.thehartford.com. Thanks for watching or listening. We will see you again soon. Take care.